In this video, we're going to be talking about forming successful habits. Now, the key in being more productive is focus and follow through. And one aspect of doing this is, of course, forming successful habits, which you can do, and you can remember how to do, by using the acronym FORM, which is FORM. We're going to be talking about those 4 steps in this video. Now, the F in FORM stands for focusing on one thing at a time. Now, this basically means that you need to learn to work on the most important things that you have to do, and you have to learn to finish those things on a routine basis. Now, you'll have lots of things on your to-do list. You'll have lots of things available to you. What you've got to do is you've got to focus on one thing at a time, finishing it, and then moving on to the next most important thing, and not just anything on your list. Now, there's a great book on some of the masters of productivity, and it's called Daily Rituals by Mason Curry. And he outlines some of the greatest artists of all time going back to the 16th century and how they mastered being able to work through one thing at a time, focus, in order to accomplish your goal. Well, that's the F in forming successful habits. Now, the O stands for overcoming challenges, and you are going to have to overcome those things that are staring you in the face, or those things that routinely distract you, those things that keep you from getting to your goal, those things that make you procrastinate. And typically, the obstacle that we're procrastinating from doing is the thing that really is going to propel us forward. There's a great book by a gentleman named Ryan Holiday, and it's called The Obstacle is the Way. You don't have to necessarily read that entire book, but understand the idea. Don't procrastinate from the thing that is in your way, the thing that's keeping you from your goal. You have to face it, and you have to move forward over it. Now, there's a way to think about overcoming challenges because there are 2 parts to it. There are those things that we procrastinate from, and then there's those things that distract us. Now, you are going to have to remind yourself to stay focused, typically with a trigger. Now, what do I mean by that? An example of a trigger is, let's say that one of the things that distracts you when things get difficult is you then like to go and visit recreational websites. Let's say that you are a sports fan and you like to visit the website ESPN. Well, you might need to give yourself a trigger so that every time you would think to go to ESPN, or you might think to visit a website that's going to make you less productive, you want to give yourself a trigger. Now, there are lots of tools available just like this one, so that every time you visit a certain website, if it's going to keep you from working, well, maybe you might want to have your browser give you a reminder like this one. Shouldn't you be working? Now, that's not going to keep you from distracting yourself, but sometimes we just need a reminder, and there are lots of little things like that that you can do to give yourself a reminder and to give yourself a trigger so that when you get to those things that are distracting you, just want to remind yourself, hey, get back to focusing on your goal. Now, another thing that you can do is you need to not just take away those things that are distracting you or those things that are going to keep you from moving forward. Now, when you do that, there's going to be a vacuum. There's going to be a void. And sometimes what you need to do is you'll need to then replace those things that you're changing. So let's follow that same pattern. Let's say that when you get distracted, you like to go and you like to visit websites that are going to distract you and keep you from thinking about the things that are going to help you in your business. Well, what could you do in its place? What kinds of things could you do to replace going to those kinds of websites? Well, you want to replace those things you're changing with something that will directly impact your success. So you don't want to change going from going from one unproductive website maybe to a more productive website, what you want to do is to replace that thing with something that's going to directly impact your profitability. If you are an entrepreneur or a marketer, start working on a project, start working on a product, start contacting people or partners that will give you more energy and give you more exposure to your business. Replace the thing that is unproductive with something that is ultra productive. So, in other words, work on something that will bring you closer to your goal. Now, in addition to replacing those things that you're changing, you're also going to want to remove your temptations. And all of us have temptations that will keep us from working. I'm going to show you probably one of the most well-known temptations to many both online marketers and entrepreneurs that everyone is familiar with. Now, we're probably all familiar with YouTube, and YouTube can be extremely productive for us. In other words, it's a way for us to learn how to do something that maybe we couldn't find any other way to do it and have it demonstrated to us. But now the flip side to the coin is that there are a number of things that could capture our attention and could cause us to be distracted from what we are trying to accomplish. And so we have to be careful. Even when we go to do these things that could distract us, that we stay focused on the thing that we are actually trying to accomplish. So one of the things that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to avoid or even remove those things that could be a temptation for us. And so this may mean that we don't watch YouTube videos until we've accomplished our goals, or we might want to find a different way in order to get the information. But we want to do everything we can to avoid spending more time on something that's going to keep us unproductive than we can by getting the information some other way. Now, if there's no other way to get the information, then you might have to be more disciplined, and you might have to go through some things that will give you the triggers and to remind yourself and to put yourself in a position to accomplish your goal while yet still using YouTube. Now, probably the thing that is a catch-all is to rely on accountability partners. Now, you don't have to try to overcome your challenges alone. And one of the best ways to do that, of course, is to have accountability partners. And you can do that by getting someone to agree to contact you and agree to talk to you about your goals and to ask you basically if you have accomplished them, if you've worked on them. And the act of accountability really is making yourself aware of what you're doing and putting yourself in the hands of someone else who will help you and guide you. They won't necessarily be telling you what to do, and they won't be a boss, but they will help you to hold yourself accountable. So overcoming challenges is the second part of forming successful habits. Now, the third is that you've got to recognize that quality counts. In other words, you've got to remember the golden rule. If you're in business, you need to produce quality and value for your customers. Now, the point in forming a successful habit is not to rush through things just to say you've accomplished them. You've got to remember that a successful habit means that you are still giving to your customer or to your employer or whoever it is or to your partners your very best. So that is why you don't want to have gaps in your schedule. You don't want to waste time. You want to be productive. And this is one of the things that will help you with the other two steps. Recognizing that quality counts. When you realize that you've got to produce and you've got to give your best, well, you might not have time to do those things that will tempt you with your time. You might not have time to do those things that would cause you to have to even have a trigger. Recognizing the quality counts is very important because it is others oriented. In other words, you consider the other person, consider your customer, you're considering your employer and your partners. You are thinking about the other person, and because of that, you're motivated then to work through your schedule and to be productive. Now, the most important thing in whatever you do is you'll need to do this consistently for 21 days in order for it to become a habit. That means then if you want to stop going to websites that keep you from being productive, well, go through the process, set up your trigger, and continue to do it for 3 weeks. Then it will become habit to you. Then it will become second nature, and then you will then be able to make it a permanent part of your life. Now, in conclusion, remember what we're doing here is we are talking about how you form successful habits. It is the first aspect of winning the outer victory. How do you start habits and how do you get them to stick? Well, you focus on one thing at a time. So you focus on building one habit, you focus on doing one thing at a time, you finish one thing and then you move on to the next. You overcome the challenges. In other words, you don't procrastinate and you don't get sidetracked with the things that distract you. Of course, then you recognize that quality counts. You figure out how to give your very best to the other people that are going to be on the other end of what you're doing. And you do this for 21 days. That is how you make it a permanent part of your life. Now, you'll need to take the action step. Decide on one successful habit. Decide on one thing that you need to build in order to be more productive. Decide on one thing that you need to do in order to accomplish your goal. Build one successful habit. Start with this video. As soon as you turn it off, write down your habit. Write down the habit that you want to build. Use the form system and start by doing it for the next 21 days. So with that, thanks, and I will see you in the next video.